Leaders in the Middle Border Forward region personify that innovation is not just a new product, but a new way of working together. From the region, we have three presenters with us today. Now, Grant said we were in the short rows, and this is true, but I have the honor of introducing three very tall leaders. On my far left, Telly Tucker is the Director of Economic Development for the City of Danville, Virginia. Telly also serves as staff of the Danville Industrial Development Authority and staff to the Danville, Pittsylvania County Regional Facilities Authority. He serves on the board of the Southern Virginia Regional Alliance and the Danville, Pittsylvania County Business Development Center. Prior to his current position in Danville, Telly served as the Assistant Director of Economic Development in James City County, Virginia, and managed an extensive portfolio for economic development. David Smitherman, he's the one in the middle. He is the county manager for Pittsylvania County, Virginia, arriving there in 2016. He has more than 20 years of experience working in local government as an appointed manager and as a consultant. While having crossed the line into Virginia, David knows rural North Carolina well. He previously served as county manager in Lee, Onslow, and Hyde counties, and a town manager in Elizabethton. So he no doubt knows a fair number of people in this room. Last is Jennifer Gregory, is Executive Director of Middle Border Forward, a nonprofit community development organization serving Danville, Pittsylvania County, and Caswell County, Virginia. Prior to joining Middle Border Forward, Jennifer spent 8 years serving low-income families and advocating for economic equity in rural North Carolina with Franklin Vance Warren Opportunity, a nonprofit community action agency. She is alumna of the North Carolina Center's READY program, the North Carolina Nonprofit Leadership Academy, Leadership North Carolina's, Leadership Southside, and a Starting Block Fellow. So they're going to take just to close us out on a strong note of how regionalism really works on the ground, and I'm grateful for y'all coming to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. If anybody had a question, when he was talking about the tall people, he was talking about me. All 5 feet 8 inches. Yeah. Thank you for having us. It's not every day that North Carolina invites friends from across the border in Virginia to share our story with you. But sitting right on the border, very much a part of the North Carolina region as much as we are the Virginia region. So we're very grateful for the opportunity. I'm going to kick us off by painting a picture for you. And I'm just going to take everyone back to, let's just call it year 1956. Danville was characterized as a booming tobacco and textile town. Dan River Mills, I believe, had 13,000 to 15,000 employees in a city at that time that only had a population of 30,000. So everyone's mother, father, cousin, sister, brother, uncle, or aunt worked at the mill. There was an opera house or theater on just about every corner. Lots of economic activity, visitors coming, hustling and bustling through the streets. If anybody was curious how I know all this in 1956, it's because I was there. Fast forward to 2006, the end of the textile era in Danville. One of the 3 largest textile manufacturers in the United States finally shuttered its doors. The city of Danville was characterized by high unemployment, between 15 and 20%, the second highest in the state of Virginia. Main Street was completely characterized by derelict structures, falling brick, metal-covered buildings. It was, by most, would define it as a ghost town. As a matter of fact, there was an industry that was considering bringing a manufacturing operation to town, and a husband and wife came and visited the region over the weekend, and they took one look at Main Street, and they said, "We will absolutely not bring our business here." That became the impetus for the region to really look at itself and kind of hold a mirror up and say, we're doing this the wrong way. We've got to redefine our own future, invest in ourselves even when no one else will. And we can't do that in a vacuum. We can't do that in a silo. We can't do it alone. We need to look around us, join hands with our neighbors, and figure out a way to do this together. Now that sounds very easy, but Virginia is one of the only states in the United States that has all independent cities and counties. And so that creates usually a competitive environment between cities and counties because each historically has fought for tax revenue. And so when a economic development project or investment is being considered, you generally had one locality kind of bad-mouthing the other, saying why you shouldn't go on that side of the line versus this side of the line. So I think you kind of understand the framework of where we were during the early 2000s. We were fortunate enough to have a group of visionary leaders in the community who said, this will not define our future. And the one way we're going to get past that is we're going to agree to share costs and we're going to agree to share revenues across locality, municipality, city, county lines. And I won't steal my colleague David's thunder because he's going to talk about that in more detail. But the concept of sharing costs and revenues really takes a lot of the competitive sting out of it. And it allowed us to create, in 2004, an entity called Mid-Atlantic Broadband Corporation. Mid-Atlantic Broadband Corporation provides an open access fiber network that stretches all across the southern 58 border for Virginia. A lot of Virginia's poorest rural counties are along Route 58. Understanding that there's no interstate, the thought process was we need to have a fiber interstate. And so, along with the partnership of the Virginia Tobacco Commission at that time, an investment from some of those communities, they created what now is a terabyte speed broadband infrastructure across some of the most rural localities in Southern Virginia. Similarly, some of the collaborative partnerships that started working together were not only just localities and elected officials working together, but it was organizations within the city, within the county that needed to work together. Case in point, Danville's downtown area, the River District, adopted a River District revitalization plan that involved developers, industrial development authorities, the Danville Regional Foundation, which is a conversion foundation from a publicly owned hospital that created a $200 million endowment that invests in education, economic development, and healthcare. It involved elected officials. It involved private property owners, all agreeing to do things like to provide public investments by way of streetscape improvements, landscaping, public trails, 11 miles of river walking trail and 35 miles of mountain biking trail, free Wi-Fi. The public sector came in and did, with the help of our friends in Richmond and then Washington, D.C., to do federal programs using historic tax credits and using new market tax credits to redevelop properties. I think most of you all were fortunate enough to hear the Fallows talk about some of the most important characteristics of cities that are redefining themselves, and a strong downtown is one of them. That was and continues to be a priority for the city of Danville in order to rebuild itself. And so those relationships that we had to establish and strengthen among groups that traditionally may not have always seen eye to eye and work together was paramount in us accomplishing what we've accomplished today. And today we've seen more than $160 million of total investment in the last 7 years in a micro city, relatively rural city in Southern Virginia. All right. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to pass to my colleague David Smitherman, because he's going to talk about how you do that in rural communities with very limited resources.
So I was in Bladen County. I was the manager of Elizabethtown many years ago, and we would go annex things for spite, it seemed like. we didn't get along well with Bladen County. When I was in Onslow County, I can't think of two organizations that had pitched battles over absolutely nothing more often than Christoph and I did in Onslow and Jacksonville. I went to Virginia 2 years ago and was shocked, completely shocked, at the partnerships that this greater community has forged for the collective good. And they had annexation battles. There's still people in the county that are mad at Danville for, what was that, 1983 was the last annexation, and people will carve things on their headstones about that. But we got through those things because the collective community, you heard, what, 15,000 people worked at a single place in a community of 30,000 people. Well, I guarantee you at least half of those 15,000 were from Pittsylvania County. Our futures are tied together, whether we want them to be or not. And it took really hitting the bottom, I think, before they collectively decided we've got to get out of this together. And it wasn't just the public sector, it was absolutely the private sector. There were a group of business folks that really spent time and their own money understanding what the economy looked like and how the future could be crafted by their inputs. And we rallied around, at that time, some industrial, some concepts and some trades that we thought would be about the future of the greater community. And it was really around precision machining, something that had been in industrial maintenance and mechatronics and things that had been in the community, but never a concerted effort to make it part of our future. In mid-2000s, we created the Regional Industrial Facilities Authority, and I know there's at least one similar organization in North Carolina, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I think it's around Halifax County, where we share the tax revenue of whatever lands in this circle. We share the same inputs and we share the same outputs. And it was the first Regional Industrial Facilities Authority in Virginia and has been held up as a model of how communities can work together to improve their collective future. Around about the same time as we figured out that these concerted investments in machining were necessary, we got our local public schools and our Danville Community College synced up with how we were going to train our kids. And now I think we're in our 7th year at Pittsylvania County Schools. We have a cohort of 40 annually that are able to go to DCC for an extra year. They come out with a high degree of certification, and they're commanding wages in the $55,000 to $65,000 a year area. These are 20-year-olds commanding that kind of money. Not only did we need to get the training pipeline going, which we did and we have, and that is now officially got its own momentum, we needed to make sure we had the jobs on the back end to hire these folks. So we are lucky, and it's hard for me to say we about Virginia when I am a Tar Heel and born and raised here and always will be, but Virginia spent their tobacco money a little different. And one of the ways we've done that in Virginia is concentrating it around the areas that had the highest reliance on tobacco during the heyday. It just so happens it's Danville, Pittsylvania County. And collectively, we are recipients of more of that funding stream than anyone else in Virginia. And we use that funding stream to invest in dirt. We built some world-class industrial parks, and we have the 3rd largest mega park east of the Mississippi in our county, with Danville as an equal partner in that. So we invested those funds wisely. We invested in training programs. We hired a consultant in the UK who regularly brings, in fact, we had an announcement last week, 2 weeks ago, of a company, and we have several UK companies now. We're going over and poaching them because they've run out of space, they've run out of workers, they can't afford what they're doing there anymore, and they need the American market. And we have created a pipeline directly from that little island of England to Danville, Pennsylvania County, and it's working for us. So now our challenge is, what's next? We feel like we're a step ahead of most folks, but we are continually looking to make sure we stay there regardless of what that idea may be. So we are collectively going through a large economic development study where we're going to relook at what we've been doing the last 10 years and figure out where we're going the next 10. So we worked together on that. We also, just another example, and I'll leave it at this, 40 miles from Danville. Pittsylvania is the largest county in Virginia, almost 1,000 square miles. It's enormous. I have board members that live 55 miles apart. It takes an hour and 15 minutes to get between their houses if they would ever consider doing that. Well, I have board members that haven't even been to parts of our county. It's so enormous. 40 miles from Danville is a town called Hurt, Virginia. It's on the Stanton River. And it was a Burlington factory town. Klopman Mills was the name of the site. And in 2007, I believe, Klopman Mills shut down. 1,300 people lost their jobs. And that place is empty. Hurt looks like it has no future whatsoever, just like many, many other mill towns in North Carolina. Danville owns 23% of our investment in Hurt. A private company came and bought that site. It's about 800 acres. We have created a RIFA, Regional Industrial Facilities Authority, with 4 different jurisdictions, Danville being the one that's furthest away. And they put in 23% of the cost, and when that site develops, they'll get 23% of the proceeds. One thing that helps about Danville and the relationship we have is that we genuinely like each other. I think we genuinely like working together on the staff level. Believe it or not, the formality between the two of us is very little. The formalities at the board level. But we get along extremely well. We enjoy working to each other. If a project won't work in Pittsylvania County, we say, Telly, you got to take this one, and vice versa. We have absolutely no turf. We know that if one of us wins, both of us wins. And I think having those honest partnerships is what's making the greater Danville region successful.
Mic drop. Sorry. I have a few slides, so I'm going to stand, if that's okay. And while they cue those up as a point of personal privilege, thank you, Patrick, for having me back again. As Jason mentioned, I am a Carolina girl. My heart beats to the rhythm of the Old North State, and so it feels like home every time I come back to the Rural Center. Thank you. So here with Danville, I have these wonderful gentlemen who really there's not much else to say about the how, the what, and the how it's been done. Like this, you could take this plan back to your community. But I want to talk to you about the why. Why regionalism? And so I'll share with you real quick. This is that enormous county that David just mentioned, Pittsylvania County, with Danville tucked right in at the bottom. I've been saying in the 2.5, 3 years that I've been in Danville that it's the geographical equivalent of the state of Rhode Island. I was fact-checked on that recently. We're actually 20% larger than the state of Rhode Island, and that's the area that we cover. That little dot there, that's my office in Danville's beautiful River District area. That's my home in Pittsylvania County's beautiful Tunstall community. I cross the red line that divides those two at least twice a day, going into my office in the beautiful River District and then heading back out to my house in the county. Twice a day I cross that line, and let me show you what I see when I do. Isn't that great? That's the vista I get to see going home every day. But notice the lack of a big red line. That line doesn't exist in real life. And so I question how much bearing that line should have on real life outcomes if it only exists on paper. And that's the philosophy that we've taken at Middle Border Forward with our approach to regional community development. It's our belief that the education a child receives or that child's access to quality health care or recreation or cultural opportunities should not be determined by their zip code. Thank you. That border should never be a barrier for the people who live inside or outside of it. So at MBF, Last year, we undertook a great challenge, Vision 2035. It is a community-driven, regional vision. And as part of that, we started on the ground level, talking to people where they lived. We went up to Hurt, Virginia. Been up there 3 times now, David. It's an hour and some change from my office to get to Hurt. As far south as Yanceyville, North Carolina, because we cover Caswell, shout out to Caswell, in the Middle Border region as well. I know this is unbelievable, but the people in Hurt and the good folks down in Yanceyville have the same ambitions. Parents want a quality education for their children. They want good quality of life. They want access to health care. They want a chance at prosperity. Their desires and ambitions for their future are the same in Hurt, Virginia, and in Yanceyville, North Carolina. Now, the strategies they undertake and the hurdles they have to clear to get to that vision may vary, but what they want and when they want it, which, by the way, is now, that doesn't change based on locality. So from that, over 6 months, we engaged 1,200 voices in a series of 30-plus events where we asked very simple questions. What's good about where we live? What's not so good about it? What can we, the people in this room, do to change it? And what does our region look like in the year 2035? From that, we created a regional vision, again, community-directed, so that ideally it's done in partnership with our friends at the municipality, but if need be, it's done in spite of our friends with the municipalities. And since that time, every 2 weeks, work groups of committed citizens, not professionals, have come together to move that vision forward. And we're proud of the work that we're doing. And why do I share that with you? Because those people cross those same red lines like I do every day. They don't exist for them either. And I would challenge that if the line doesn't exist for your citizens who are your customers, then it shouldn't exist for you either. We've also promoted Love Middle Border. It's a hashtag campaign that we use on our social media and in swag across the region to get away from being Danville-centric or Pittsylvania County or what about us in Hurt or hey, Caswell's left out down here. We love Middle Border and we challenge all of our neighbors to post on social media what they love about our region and share it together. And because we can't do this alone, we've launched Middle Border Fellows. It's an annual fellowship of grassroots emerging leaders who are well-versed on the region as a whole. And we're in our 3rd year now. Key takeaways that always come from the fellows are, 1, they never knew the assets that were there in the region. And 2, they get it. They don't want to be confined or defined by their zip code. They want to rise together as a region. And so our last class that just graduated in September, every class is challenged with a low-key $5,000, so it's really low-key, community impact project. They ideated over dozens, and I mean dozens of projects, and they came up with this. 434-336, those are the area codes in our region. This is their Meet Me in the Middle campaign. This logo was plastered on all sorts of swag and distributed at fairs and festivals and in Walmart parking lots across our region to get the citizenry on board with the idea that those lines don't exist. So why regionalism? Sure, it's maximizing our assets and sharing resources, but that's the economics of regionalism. Regionalism is deeper than that. Because those lines don't exist, regionalism is about equity. Regionalism is, and she told me not to do this. I have my daughter here today. Everybody say hi, Tia. My daughter's a freshman at Tunstall High School. My daughter should get the same quality education at Tunstall High that a student at George Washington High School in Danville receives, or that a student receives at Young High School in Caswell County. It's not about economics. It's about equity. It's about a line that only exists on paper. And when we talk about regionalism, we say, yes, a rising tide lifts all boats. But your boat can't be lifted if it's not in the water. So include all of your communities in your region, in your conversations, because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. We're all done. Are we taking questions, Patrick?
We have time to take a few questions. Yeah, we got the microphone. We take some questions. Have any questions? We got a live mic here, or get up and shout.
You're letting us off really easy. One thing I will just add, as I thought about it and I listened to Jennifer's and David's comments, it's really a challenge, but it's one that it's one of the most, I guess, enjoyable defining accomplishments of my career is some of the partnerships that have been created across workforce development platforms. I've worked in the numerous communities around Virginia, and it's not every community you go into where you actually see K-12 educators working with community colleges, working with workforce development boards, working with higher education institutions, and aligning their goals with economic development goals. So if you think about a proverbial Venn diagram, there are areas where all of those organizations overlap. And this Southern Virginia region was the first opportunity I had to actually sit in the room with all of those folks and help them understand how a student who has career technical experience scores better on standardized test scores is more likely to go to a community college, who then is an asset to an industry, who then I use as a recruiting tool to land a new industry. And so it was really rewarding to have everyone kind of break down those silos, check egos at the door, and then just come in and talk about how we could all strategize to help each other accomplish our goals. And that some of that was born out of the unfortunate circumstances we had to go through, but I'm hopeful that other communities will not have to go through that before some of those relationships are forged and some of that planning and collaboration starts to happen. And we're very proud of that. We will share that with whomever, wherever, whenever. And so please feel free to use any of us. I think I speak for the panel when we say use us as a resource.
Thank you all. Any burning questions?
Yeah,
Deb.
yeah.
Deb Watts.
Yeah, Deb Watts, you talked about working across the state border with Caswell County. And my question is, we heard yesterday the encouragement to break down the silos and work across borders. This is a common theme, this cross-border collaboration. And I've spent some time trying to do that. It mostly related to broadband and using that as an economic development tool. And we work very closely with the Institute of Advanced Learning and Research in Danville. And we've put together a couple of proposals over the years to try and bring federal dollars down to do some workforce training and some other initiatives that would work across that North Carolina-South Carolina border. And we just hit political hurdles because, you know, people would say they would support it, and they would, but when it came to actually funding it, the priority would go to ones where they could cut the ribbon in their state only, and the perception was that they wouldn't be giving money to another state. And what I'd like to know from you is if you think that's really changing, and if it isn't, how can we work to make the sources of funds more receptive to really doing cross-border projects?
I'll comment on that. That's a difficult question because there's people in Richmond and Raleigh that have interests that people in Pittsylvania and Caswell may not have. For example, I guess it's okay to talk about Toyota Mazda. It was a major project that we were in the short rows on in Danville and Pittsylvania County, as was Guilford County with the Randolph mega site. At the end of the day, both sites were in the game. Both were in the top 3 with Huntsville, Alabama. We were the first shoe to drop And the first thing we did was reach out to our neighbors in Guilford County and figure out how can we help you with this project. It just so happens we have a rail line in our mega park that connects to their mega park. Maybe we can be the supplier site for Toyota Mazda. Obviously, neither one of us won, but those conversations are the seeds, I think, that are germinating right now between the two states. Telly and I talk more about our relationship to Greensboro and I-40 than we do to Charlottesville or Roanoke or Richmond. We don't see that border. We know that one of the assets of our community is our proximity to North Carolina. Additionally, the city of Eden is helping us with our mega park. They're the sole water supplier for the Berry Hill mega site. So we are looking for those opportunities. We talked to those folks in Eden. In fact, I was talking to them within the last 2 weeks. And it's just, all I can say is it's got to be these grassroots baby steps, laying seeds, get them started. Eventually, this conversation will be between the folks in Richmond and Raleigh, but until then, it's going to be between Danville, Pennsylvania, and Guilford.
Thank you, David. And I would add, I think the Fallows challenged us all also that this takes a long time. Good planning and good strategic development takes a good while. And they also challenged us to not let national politics divide us on a local level. And I think, to David's point, trying to get our elected officials in Richmond and Raleigh, we need to be the advocates that insist that those conversations need to be happening and demand that they happen because we are having those decisions on a local level, but oftentimes the purse strings are controlled outside of our border. So I empathize with that frustration, and we would love to be doing more. And we're going to continue pushing our elected officials on our side of the line and would hope that you all do the same.
That actually is a perfect note for us to be ending on. Thank you, Jennifer, Telly, and David. The work you and your community members are doing in your region to transform Danville is an inspiration to all of us. We sincerely appreciate you taking the time to come down today to be with us and share your story. Let's give the Danville folks another round of applause. So our rural communities really are the backbone of North Carolina. So much of what makes North Carolina a desirable place to live, work, and play are qualities born out of and nurtured in rural North Carolina. But today our rural communities face significant challenges. We've talked about a lot of them over the last 2 days. Since the Great Recession, North Carolina's small towns and rural communities have struggled to recover and keep pace with thriving metro and urban cores. But I hope what you've heard over these 2 days are examples of rural places embracing innovation, engaging leadership from across the community and across lines that don't really exist perhaps except on paper, to build places that are not just surviving, but they are thriving. What I hope you heard over these past 2 days are the stories of people fixing things, of communities working together to solve a problem, to find a solution, to build a dream, to build a better future. It's time we doubled down on working together in our communities and across our regions. The future is exactly what we dare to make of it. Let us all here today lead the way for a better rural North Carolina. Thank you for being here with us over these last 2 days. You're the reason we exist. You inspire our work. You motivate us to do better for our state's rural places. We cannot wait to see what the future holds for you, your communities, the places you love, your center of the universe, and this state. We thank you. Safe travels.